Okay, today we're going to talk everything related to forms. Now, forms are tied to a sheet. So they live up here on the top left-hand side of the sheet under the forms section. This is where you can create and manage forms. You can have a sheet that does not have a form. It's just a standalone sheet, but every form that you make lives on a sheet, if that makes sense. If I'm going to go in here and create a new form, I'm just going to click this create form. If I wanted to look at a form that was already created, I would go to manage forms. If I do that now, you can see there's no forms listed here. So you could also just go directly to here to create the form. So I'm going to call this the data entry form. Note that this name came from the sheet name. So you can name your form something different than your sheet. I'm going to call this the new store intake form. Let's just call it that. Now, Smartsheet pre-populates your form with the columns that are currently in the sheet. So if I just save this and then I go back, you can see I have a primary column, which is standard in every single sheet. And then you have columns 2 through 6 here. So your form fields are tied to a column in the sheet, and I'll show you what that means as we go along. You don't necessarily need to use a primary column. If I would use a primary column, I would put requester name. Another key thing to think through as well is if you want to email the requester, you're going to need a contact list column. So you wouldn't necessarily want to potentially use this primary column for the requester name if you want to send them an email. So let's actually change this to project address because this is going to be our new store intake form. So now I've saved this to project address. If I wanted to move some things around, you can simply just drag and drop the fields, which is really nice. You can also use this little button, these little arrows to move them around. And let's just look through the different types of field settings. And you'll note the different types of fields are the same as the different types of column types. So they're one and the same here. So I'm going to make this a requester. So we want to know, hey, if you were submitting this form, I want to know who submitted this. And I'm going to make it a contact list column. You can pre-populate contacts through here if you wanted by just typing them in and searching them. You can restrict to only those people who are in this list. If you toggled this, then let's just say I did this, then only my name would pop up. But if you leave this unrestricted, that allows the user to actually type in any email they want, regardless of if it's actually in this contact list. You can also allow multiple contacts per cell, which I'd be a little bit careful about this. But if you allow multiple contacts per cell, what this does, if you allow multiple contacts per cell, that means they can select multiple names as the requester, but I'm not going to do that for now. So I'm going to change this to requester. All right, let's just focus on this one right now. So this field settings section on the right-hand side, this is basically where you can change the settings of this specific field, which may be obvious, but I'm going to walk through exactly what this section is over here. So I'm on the field part of this right now. I could put a label on this field, and what that does is it puts the label on the field, but your name of the field, which is also the column in your sheet, that stays the same. And the benefit of this is you can be very, very detailed here. You can use some flowery language, but at the end of the day, when you go to look at this data in your sheet, your columns aren't messy, they aren't crazy, they can be very concise. So I highly recommend keeping your column names very simple, concise, straightforward, but if you need to add more detail, use the label feature. You can also add help text, which is really great. You can put, if your name is not listed in the dropdown, please enter your email below and click enter because some people forget to do that. So you can give a little bit of helper text here, which showed up very nicely, and this is a very helpful feature. It's really nice too. You can change the font, you can change the color. I'm not going to be too crazy about it. You can put bullet points. You can even put a hyperlink. So if you want to say, hey, you only use this form for this reason, if you need to go to a different form, you could put the link to that form here, which is really nice. Next is the required field. So you see this little asterisk just popped up. That is making this form field required. They cannot submit the form unless they enter this data. So unless they put in their name, they're not going to be able to actually submit the form, and it will tell them, hey, you're missing some data. This is a hidden field, so I'll kind of talk through this later. It doesn't really make sense for the requester, but I'll kind of show you how that would work. Then you can display this field in different ways. So you could do, right now it's set as the drop-down single select. You could do a vertical radio button, a horizontal radio button, and then you could also do a default. So I'm going to leave this how it is right now. And then you could also add validation. So I want to make sure that whatever they put in here is an email. So I'm going to say I want email validation. The other part of this that I don't want to skip over right now, I'm going to make this required, is logic. So you can add logic onto these fields, which I'll show you an example in a little bit. But you can add logic onto these fields, and it's really nice, and it makes this form process like beautiful. All right, so we've kind of walked through the field settings. We'll do some more examples. Now we want to take a look at the left-hand side. So this field section, this is basically looking at columns in your sheet. And if you, let's just say I delete column 3. If there are columns in your sheet that are currently not in your form, that's where they're going to show up. So that if you wanted to add it, say you added a bunch of columns to your sheet and you're like, I need to put these in my form, you could easily drag and drop them back into your form. You can also add a heading description. So let's just call this store information, which is really nice. So this is a heading or description. Again, you can still add more text here if you wanted to and give a lot of detail. You can also add a divider. So if I want to kind of divide my sections, you can do that as well. So let's just drop some information in. The other thing on here is a file upload, which is nice. And you can actually make this required if you want, or unrequired. So I think this is always a really nice feature to add. But let's just throw in, okay, let's throw in, we have the requester name. Let's just maybe put in department, if I could spell. So let's just, we're making this, wow, still didn't spell it right. We're making this a drop-down list. We're going to restrict to list values. We're going to make this, I'll show you vertical, horizontal. And maybe for here, we say real estate is always going to be the default value. So this is what it looks like. When they open the form, the default value will be on real estate. And then if it happens to be an operation or salesperson, they can toggle from there. I'm going to leave this off actually, just so you know that's kind of how that works. And let's just say we want to make this required as well. Now let's throw in, let's change these columns. So we're going to make this a store number. And when you have a field that is a number-only field, you can change your validation to make it number only. Pretty nice. That means they can't enter any letters or dashes or anything. It's just got to be a number, so that's really nice. We're going to make some of these required. I like to make any field required that makes sense, right? And let's put in a date. So we'll put in a date, restrict to dates only, make that required. And then let's do the country. So let's just say this could be in USA or Canada. And for these, I like to make these actually vertical because it's like, how do you use up your space on this form efficiently? Because you don't want too much space. You don't want it to be too bulky. You want it to be easy for them to use because with the drop downs, there's a lot of like clicking in and then selecting, clicking in, selecting. But with the radio buttons, it's just one click. So kind of think through your form and what makes the most sense for you. So if I have a country, then I could say maybe there is a USA specific field, like a state. So for Canada, let's put province or territory because they're a little bit different, right? And this is a really good place to add logic. So I don't want to have both of these things show up if somebody chooses USA. And I want both of these fields to be required so that no matter what, they're filling it out. So this is where you choose the field that you're going to use logic on, and you're going to say country is, so you could choose any of these things, but I like to, for this example, just do is if it's a singular thing you're choosing. So it is USA, and then I want state to show up. And then add, and then just make sure you save. And then add another rule. If it's Canada, then I want province or territory to show up, save. And what I like to do, the way that I build my forms, is once I put in that one piece of logic, I open the form immediately, and I test it. And this is a best practice because if you're adding a lot of fields to your form and you're adding a lot of logic, you can really dig yourself into a rabbit hole and it could be not good because you're adding all these layers of logic, and if you're not testing along the way, it's going to be more difficult to figure out where you went wrong. So that's kind of my 2 cents on kind of creating the logic. So you'll see here, this is the field where the logic lives, and this is the field tied to the logic. So you can hover over this little icon and you can see what the rule is. So if country is Canada, this field is showing up. So that's how the logic works within this form. Another thing that you can add, I think, which is really nice, is like a symbol. So let's just add, actually, you can add symbols, but another nice thing to add is maybe like a little flag. So if this is a priority for whatever reason, then you can have, and don't make it required necessarily if it's like this little checkbox, but if it's a priority, they can flag this, and maybe we bring this to the top, right? So if it's a priority, they can flag it. The default is unchecked. You can display as label above or to the right, which is nice, kind of different way to look at it, but that's kind of a nice feature to add. Now, things that I wouldn't necessarily add to a form, I really wouldn't add created by, created date, modified by, modified date. Those are things that make more sense on the sheet level, including auto number. So really from auto number down, I would just leave those on the sheet level, but really these are going to be where your bread and butter are for building out your forms. All right, now a few other things to note. You can change this logo. You can take the logo off completely if you don't want the Smartsheet logo. You could even add a format background, so you could change the color, or you could put a really nice image. The one thing about the images are that you kind of have to play around with it. You have to I don't know the exact file sizes to put on there, so do some research, and I can do some research and put it in this training, but it can get a little tricky depending on your mobile desktop version. Yeah, so that's just kind of my 2 cents on the images for your form, but it's a really nice feature to add. You can also, onto your form description, add a description for your form, so when somebody opens it, they see what is this form all about. So let's just say this is where you submit new stores. If for whatever reason you didn't want to show this because maybe you're going to put a really nice icon on your form with all this info, then you can say do not show title and description. At least you have it here so that if you are opening this up and editing it, you know what this form's all about, but you can do that as well. And then here you could also kind of center this up. All right, so we're almost done. The next part of this is going to be the settings. So right now I have it vertical. So if I just open this up, this is a vertical form. If I go back to settings and I want it to be side by side, I click side by side, save, open form. So it's a little bit different, which this is a really nice view if you have a really crisp icon here that could be really, really nice and customizable. You can remove Smartsheet branding on the form footer if you want. You could require a Smartsheet login to access this form. I don't typically do this. You could reduce spam if you want. And then this is what's really nice. I think you could actually have it, you could either have it display a confirmation message that just says what this here. Once they submit the form, it's going to say, success, we've captured your response. Or you could have it reload the same form for another entry, which is really nice if you have people entering in back-to-back information. Maybe they're doing 3 submissions at a time. I would definitely set this reload the same form for another entry. Or you could send the user to a link. So if once they submit it, they need to go to a dashboard or something, then you could send the user to a link and put the link here. And then another thing you could do is select how you want the data to go into your sheet. Do you want it to go into the top of the sheet, so the newest entries would be on the top of your sheet, or do you want the newest entries to be on the bottom of your sheet? I personally like top of the sheet, but I think it's dependent on however you're using this form is really how you're going to set this setting. And then you can also allow submitters to check a little box that will email them a copy of their own submission. So that's kind of personal preference, I think. So I'm going to save the form settings. I'm going to let's open this puppy up and let's submit something so we can see how it ties actually to the sheet. So I'm going to put in my stuff. I'm going to put, I'm on real estate team. Let's put the street, let's put the store, opening at the end of the month. We're going to say Missouri. I don't have any files to upload. This was that send me a copy of my responses. That'll send me a copy of whatever I submit just now, but I'm just going to submit this. Here's that success, we've captured your response. Let's go back to the sheet to see what happened. So I'm going to refresh this. And yeah, here we go. Here is my sheet. You see how all the fields are tied to the form fields. You can see I didn't enter anything in for province or territory because I had logic to have it not show up. And yeah, from here, if I did another entry, it would show up on row 1. So again, I have my settings on my form so that as I get new entries, the new entries will go to the top of my sheet. So really that is all things forms. If you want to manage your form from here on out, this is where you would go. You could see I have one submission. If you wanted to just quickly copy your form URL, you could do that. It's copied to the clipboard. If you wanted to open up the finished part of your form, you would click that little arrow. That's going to open you up to the actual form. If you want to go to edit mode, you could either click edit or you could just click straight into here, which is nice. You could also embed this, which is really great if you want to embed it onto a dashboard. So like people could, instead of having to click into a form, they could submit it already. They could submit it just on your dashboard without having to click into anything. And if you want to deactivate your form, you can do that too. So that'll make it so that nobody can access your form. It'll say it's deactivated and it'll show as inactive here. I hope that was helpful. That's a quick form tutorial. I will do more tutorials on how exactly to make forms look a lot fancier than this really simple one I did, so stay tuned for more.